I never revealed to my son Travis the truth about my $48,000 monthly income, preferring to maintain a modest lifestyle. When he anxiously asked me to meet his fiance's successful parents, I chose to test their character by appearing as a financially struggling pensioner. But the instant his future mother-in-law declared, "This expensive food shouldn't go to waste, Weston. You'll need it more than us," I understood their true nature completely. And when their payment cards were rejected, they had no clue that the destitute old gentleman they had just degraded was actually the one controlling their fate. Pay attention carefully. Let me reveal my true identity. Before I reveal who I really am, let me know, what city are you listening from? And have you ever had to prove your worth to someone who judged you too quickly? My alarm buzzed at 5:30, just like it had every morning for the past 20 years. I rolled out of my narrow bed feet, hitting the cold hardwood floor of my modest Denver apartment. No fancy marble tiles here, just honest wood that creaked with age and character. I shuffled to my small kitchen past furniture that most people would donate to Goodwill. My coffee maker was older than my son's pilot career, but it still brewed a decent cup. As steam rose from my chipped mug, I glanced at the stack of mail on my counter. Bills mostly, nothing that screamed executive lifestyle. What those bills didn't show was the direct deposit that hit my account every month, $48,000. Enough to buy a mansion in Cherry Hills Village, drive a Tesla, wear designer suits. Instead, I drove a 10-year-old Honda Civic and shopped at Target. My neighbors probably thought I was just another retiree scraping by. The truth was more complicated. As regional director of Rocky Mountain Renewable Energy, I oversaw wind farms from Colorado to California, managed budgets that could fund small cities. But when I came home to this apartment, I was just another guy in faded jeans. My phone rang as I was buttering toast. Travis's name flashed on the screen. "Morning, Dad." My son's voice carried warmth, but something else too. Nervousness. "Hey, kiddo, you're up early for a pilot." "Actually, that's why I'm calling." He paused. "Sailor's parents are visiting this weekend. They want to meet you." I set down my coffee. "That's nice. I'd like to meet them too. They're successful business owners. Restaurant group, 8 locations." Another pause. "Dad, just, dress nicely, okay?" There it was. My 32-year-old son, accomplished airline pilot, worried that his old man might embarrass him. Travis had no idea that my monthly salary could buy one of those restaurants outright. "Sure, son. I'll dust off my good shirt." "Thanks, Dad. We're meeting them Saturday evening at the Broadmoor." The Broadmoor. I knew it well. I'd hosted corporate dinners there, signed million-dollar deals in their conference rooms. But Travis didn't know that. To him, I was just a simple maintenance worker who'd somehow scraped together enough for retirement. After we hung up, I stood in my living room, looking at the worn furniture, the basic television, the bare walls. I'd built this life deliberately raised Travis to understand that worth came from character, not bank accounts. My own father had been a janitor, my mother a seamstress. They'd taught me that money was a tool, not an identity. But now my son was embarrassed by me, worried that his poor father might not measure up to his fiancée's successful family. I'd spent 4 decades in business, and I'd learned something important. You only see people's true character when they think you're beneath them. When they believe you have nothing to offer, no power to wield, no influence to grant. A slow smile spread across my face as I finished my coffee. I'd spent my career reading people, understanding their motivations, their weaknesses. The restaurant business was tough. I knew that much from the energy contracts I'd signed with hospitality groups over the years. Saturday evening was going to be very interesting indeed. The Chambers family was about to meet Travis's father. They had their expectations about successful business owners and simple working men. I had 5 days to prepare, 5 days to decide exactly how this meeting would go. They had no idea what was coming. The research began Tuesday afternoon. I pulled up my laptop, nothing fancy, just a basic Dell I'd bought 3 years ago, and started digging into the Chambers Restaurant Group. Their website was polished professional. 8 locations across Colorado from Denver to Vail. Family-owned since 1987. The usual corporate speak about excellence in hospitality and serving communities with pride. Local business journals painted a clearer picture. Lorenzo Chambers had started with a single diner in Pueblo, worked his way up through smart acquisitions and strategic locations. The Denver Post had featured them last year, gross revenue approaching $800,000 annually. Respectable, but not exactly Fortune 500 territory. I bookmarked a few articles, memorized key details. 8 restaurants, 37 years in business. recent expansion into the ski resort market. These weren't billionaires, but they'd done well for themselves, well enough to develop opinions about who belonged at their table. Wednesday morning, I dug through my storage closet hunting for clothes I hadn't worn in decades. There, behind Christmas decorations and old tax returns, I found what I was looking for: my original work shirts from the wind farms. Faded blue cotton permanent stains from hydraulic fluid, name patch long since removed. The boots were there too, steel-toed Timberlands that had seen real weather. I tried them on. Still fit, though they felt strange after years of business casual. The mirror showed me a different man, someone who worked with his hands, worried about overtime, counted every dollar. It was like stepping back in time, back to who I'd been before the promotions, before the corner office. Thursday I practiced. Sounds ridiculous, but I walked differently in those clothes, talked differently, dropped my shoulders, softened my voice, added hesitation where confidence used to live. I studied my reflection, memorizing the posture of humility, the expression of someone grateful for whatever kindness came his way. Travis called Friday evening, right as I was heating up a frozen dinner. "Dad, I wanted to give you more details about tomorrow." His voice carried that same nervous energy. The Chambers family, they're really something. Lorenzo owns 8 restaurants, and Cordelia manages the operations. They've got a house in Cherry Hills Village, drive matching BMWs. I stirred my mac and cheese, letting him talk. Sailor says they're generous people, but they have high standards. They believe in success, in building something meaningful with your life. Sounds like good people, I said carefully. They are. I just want everything to go smoothly tomorrow night. After we hung up, I sat in my kitchen, wrestling with doubt. Was I being unfair? Maybe the Chambers family would surprise me. Maybe they'd see past appearances, treat a retired maintenance worker with genuine respect. But Travis's words echoed high standards, success, building something meaningful. Code words, polite ways of saying they measured people by their achievements, their status, their worth on paper. I'd raised my son to be better than that. Apparently I'd failed somewhere along the way. Saturday morning arrived gray and cold, typical November weather in Colorado. I dressed slowly, deliberately. The old work shirt, faded jeans boots that had walked through mud and machinery. I grabbed my simplest wallet, black leather worn thin, containing exactly $43 in cash and a basic debit card. Hidden behind it, barely visible, was another card entirely. Black heavy with my name embossed in silver, but that one would stay hidden. For now. The drive to Colorado Springs would take 90 minutes. 90 minutes to transform completely from Weston Hale Regional Director to Weston, the retired guy who fixed wind turbines for 30 years. I started the Honda and pulled on to I-25 South. The mountains rose ahead of me, snow-capped and eternal. Somewhere in those peaks was the Broadmoor, where my son's future in-laws waited to meet the man who'd raised him. Time to see what kind of people they really were. The Broadmoor rose before me like something from a different world. Manicured lawns stretched in perfect lines, fountains sparkled under evening lights, and luxury cars filled the circular drive. BMWs, Mercedes, a few Teslas. My Honda looked like a rust bucket among thoroughbreds. I parked in the farthest corner of the lot, checking my reflection one last time. The work shirt hung loose on my frame, the boots scuffed and practical. Perfect. I grabbed my worn wallet, locked the car, and walked toward the entrance. The lobby hit me with marble floors, crystal chandeliers, and the soft murmur of wealth. Guests glided past in designer clothes, their conversations peppered with talk of ski seasons and wine collections. I felt every eye on me, cataloging my appearance, filing me away under doesn't belong. "Dad!" Travis's voice cut through the ambient music. He approached with quick steps, Sailor beside him. My son looked sharp in his navy blazer, every inch the successful pilot. But his smile seemed forced, his shoulders tense. "You made good time," he said, not quite meeting my eyes. "Traffic was light." I turned to Sailor, extending my hand. "You must be Sailor. Travis talks about you constantly." She shook my hand briefly, her grip polite but distant. "Nice to meet you, Mr. Hale." Her smile was practiced, the kind flight attendants perfected for difficult passengers. She wore a cream-colored dress that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. "My parents are already at the table," she said, gesturing toward the restaurant. "They're excited to meet you." We walked through corridors lined with oil paintings and fresh flowers. Other guests nodded at Travis, and Sailor ignored me completely. I might as well have been invisible. The restaurant was all dark wood, and soft lighting tables spaced for private conversations. In the corner near windows overlooking the golf course sat a couple who had to be the Chambers. Lorenzo was a big man, silver-haired and confident, wearing a suit that fit like it was tailored yesterday. Cordelia sat beside him, elegant in emerald silk jewelry catching the light. They looked up as we approached, and I watched their faces change. Lorenzo's welcoming smile flickered slightly. Cordelia's eyes swept over my clothes, my boots, my general appearance. The assessment was quick, thorough, and unmistakably dismissive. Mom, Dad, Sailor said, "This is Travis's father, Weston Hale." Lorenzo stood extending his hand. His grip was firm, businessman strong, but brief. "Weston, pleasure to meet you. I'm Lorenzo. This is my wife, Cordelia." Cordelia offered her hand like she was bestowing a favor. "How lovely to finally meet Travis's father." The waiter appeared, guiding us to our seats. Somehow I ended up in the chair facing away from the view, the one with a slight wobble. The others settled into plush seats with perfect sightlines of the mountains. "Beautiful evening," I said, looking around the dining room. "This is quite a place." "We come here often," Lorenzo replied, settling his napkin. "The Broadmoor maintains certain standards. We appreciate that." The menus arrived, leather-bound heavy, written in elegant script. No prices listed, which meant they were expensive enough to scare away anyone who had to ask. "The wine list here is exceptional," Cordelia said, flipping through pages. "We're thinking of adding some of these selections to our restaurants." 8 locations now, Lorenzo added, his voice carrying pride. "Started with one little diner in Pueblo, built it into something substantial." Travis shifted in his seat. "Dad used to work in energy, wind farms mostly." "How interesting," Cordelia said in a tone that suggested it wasn't interesting at all. "That must have been demanding work." The waiter returned, pen poised. "Can I start you with cocktails this evening?" Lorenzo ordered a $25 scotch. Cordelia chose wine from a bottle that probably cost more than I had spent on groceries this month. Travis and Sailor followed suit with premium selections. "Just water for me," I said. "Ice water's fine." The waiter nodded and disappeared. An awkward silence settled over the table, broken only by the soft clink of silverware from nearby tables. Lorenzo cleared his throat, leaning forward slightly. "So, Weston, tell us about yourself." The question hung in the air like expensive cologne. I folded my hands on the white tablecloth, letting a moment pass before answering. "I spent most of my career doing maintenance work. Energy facilities, mostly wine farms across Colorado and Wyoming." I kept my voice humble. Honest work, nothing glamorous. Lorenzo nodded, already categorizing me. "Wind energy. That's growing these days. Clean power, good for the environment." I was lucky to be part of something meaningful. Cordelia leaned forward. "Emerald earrings catching the light. Oh, how practical." That must have been demanding physical work, all that manual labor. The way she said manual labor made it sound like a disease. I didn't mind it. There's satisfaction in keeping things running. Sailor spoke up honey-sweet with condescension. "It's so admirable how you embrace that simple lifestyle, Weston. Not everyone can appreciate minimalism the way you do." Travis shifted uncomfortably. "Dad's always been independent." "Independence is wonderful," Lorenzo cut in smoothly, "but we all need family support. That's what makes us human." The appetizers arrived, delicate arrangements that looked like art. I'd chosen the simplest salad, still probably worth a full Denny's meal. "So you're retired now," Lorenzo continued. "Fixed income, I imagine. I get by. Don't need much." Cordelia made a sympathetic sound. "Denver winters must be challenging for someone your age living alone. The heating bills—" "I manage fine. Keep the thermostat low." Travis stared at his plate, clearly uncomfortable. Sailor placed a possessive hand on his arm. "I just worry about Travis having to think about additional responsibilities," Sailor said softly. "He works so hard already. A pilot's schedule is demanding without extra concerns." There it was. I was a burden. A liability Travis would have to manage. Lorenzo raised his scotch. "Family is everything, Weston. When we built our restaurant business, we did it thinking about legacy, creating something substantial. 8 locations now," Cordelia added proudly. "Started with nothing but determination." "That's impressive," I said, meaning it. "The restaurant business teaches you about people, about value quality. You learn to recognize what lasts and what doesn't." Another loaded comment. I was apparently in the doesn't last category. Travis found his voice. "Dad taught me about hard work, too, about doing your job right." "Of course," Cordelia said quickly. "All honest work has dignity," but their tone suggested otherwise. Success means different things, Lorenzo continued. Some folks are content with simplicity. Others want to build something bigger. Sailor nodded. That's why Travis and I connect. We both have ambitions beyond just getting by. The implication was clear. I was the getting by type, the man who aimed low and achieved less. I took another bite of overpriced salad, letting their words settle. Around us, other diners enjoyed their expensive meals, their comfortable assumptions about who belonged. Our families should take care of each other, Lorenzo said finally, his eyes meeting mine directly. Don't you think, Weston? I nodded slowly, as if considering the wisdom of his words. I suppose they should. The main courses arrived with theatrical precision servers in crisp white shirts, presenting plates like precious artifacts. Lorenzo's steak looked like it cost more than my monthly electric bill. Cordelia's salmon was artfully arranged with microgreens I couldn't pronounce. My chicken breast, the most modest option, still came with enough garnish to feed a small family. Exactly, Lorenzo said, cutting into his meat with surgical precision. That's why Cordelia and I wanted to have this conversation tonight. We've been blessed with success, and we believe in sharing that blessing. He paused to chew, letting the weight of his generosity settle over the table. Sailor leaned forward, her voice soft with manufactured concern. Travis works so incredibly hard, Weston. All those cross-country flights, the irregular schedule, the pressure of keeping passengers safe. I just want him to focus on his career without any distractions. The word distractions hung between us like a loaded gun. She meant me, of course. I was the distraction. The aging father who might need help, might call at inconvenient times, might require Travis to choose between his wife and his old man. What Sailor means, Lorenzo continued, is that young couples need space to build their foundation, to establish their own traditions, their own priorities. Travis set down his fork. This isn't necessary. Dad doesn't need. I placed my hand gently on his arm, feeling the tension in his muscles. It's okay, son. They mean well. Lorenzo smiled triumphantly. See, your father understands. He's a practical man. Cordelia dabbed her lips with her napkin. We've given this considerable thought, Weston. A monthly stipend, nothing extravagant, but enough to ensure you're comfortable. Maybe $500, $600. The amount was carefully calculated enough to sound generous to them, not enough to actually change my life. Enough to make me grateful, dependent, manageable. That's very kind, I said, quietly playing my role. But I couldn't accept charity. It's not charity, Lorenzo said quickly. It's family investment. We're investing in Travis's peace of mind, in Sailor's happiness. When they don't have to worry about your situation, they can focus on building their future together. My situation. As if poverty was a medical condition I'd contracted through poor life choices. And in return, Cordelia added sweetly, we'd just ask that you give them space. Let them establish their marriage without feeling obligated to check on you constantly. Young love needs room to breathe. Travis's jaw tightened. Mom, Cordelia, that's not... Travis, honey. Sailor interrupted, her hand finding his again. They're trying to help. We all want what's best for everyone. The restaurant hummed around us with the comfortable sounds of wealth. Crystal clinking quiet laughter, the soft murmur of people who'd never worried about heating bills or grocery budgets. At a nearby table, a woman was showing off photos of her recent European vacation. Think about it practically, Lorenzo pressed. $600 a month, maybe $700 if needed. That's real money for someone on a fixed income. It could make the difference between struggling and living with dignity. Living with dignity. As if dignity could be purchased in monthly installments. We're not asking you to disappear, Cordelia clarified, just to understand that Travis has a new life now, new responsibilities, a wife who deserves his full attention. I looked around the table at Lorenzo's confident smile, at Cordelia's practiced compassion, at Sailor's calculated sweetness, at my son torn between loyalty and social pressure, trying to navigate waters he'd never learned to swim in. That's very generous of you, I said finally. I'll need to think about it. Lorenzo raised his wine glass. Of course. Take all the time you need. But remember, Weston pride is expensive. Sometimes the wisest thing is to accept help when it's offered. He took a sip of wine that probably cost more than my weekly grocery budget. Think about our offer, Weston. Family takes care of family. The plates sat before us, evidence of an expensive meal half consumed. Lorenzo had barely touched his $40 steak. Cordelia's salmon lay artfully destroyed, more pushed around than eaten. My chicken. The cheapest option was nearly finished old habits from a childhood where you cleaned your plate or went hungry. Sailor dabbed her lips with the cloth napkin, leaving a faint trace of lipstick on the pristine white fabric. That was delicious. I'm so full I can barely move. The portions here are always generous. Lorenzo agreed, leaning back in his chair with the satisfied air of a man who'd never worried about the cost of a meal. Cordelia caught the waiter's attention with a subtle gesture, the kind wealthy people perfected for summoning service. "Excuse me, could you please box up these leftovers?" The young waiter nodded professionally. "Of course, ma'am. All of them?" "Yes, please." She turned to me with a smile that looked benevolent, but felt condescending. "Weston, you should take this home. Waste not, want not right." The restaurant seemed to quiet around us, or maybe that was just my imagination. But I could feel eyes turning our way, other diners registering the scene, the well-dressed family having their leftovers packed for the shabby older man at their table. "This food costs more than—" Cordelia paused delicately. "Well, you understand." She said it loud enough that the couple at the neighboring table glanced over. The woman's eyes swept over my work shirt, my weathered hands, my general appearance, and I saw her whisper something to her husband. Travis's face flushed red. "Mom, Cordelia, that's not—" "It's practical." "Travis," Sailor interrupted smoothly, her voice honey-sweet with false kindness, "Weston probably appreciates not having to cook tomorrow. Don't you, Weston?" All eyes were on me now. The waiter stood frozen, uncertain whether to proceed. The neighboring table had stopped pretending not to listen. Even the sommelier had paused in his wine presentation to another table. "That's very thoughtful." I managed the words tasting like sawdust. "Thank you." The waiter moved with obvious discomfort, carefully transferring expensive remnants into styrofoam containers. Lorenzo's barely touched steak, worth more than most people's daily wages. Cordelia's designer salmon, even the untouched bread rolls and herb butter. "We always take care of our family." "Weston," Lorenzo said, his voice carrying across the dining room, "that's just who we are." The words hit like a public announcement. This man needs our charity. This man can't afford to waste food. This man is so poor he's grateful for our table scraps. I watched the waiter's hands shake slightly as he sealed the containers. He was young, probably working his way through college, and his embarrassment was almost as acute as mine. He'd served hundreds of wealthy families, but he'd probably never had to package leftovers for someone's charity case. "There you go, sir," he said quietly, placing the bag beside my chair. The containers clinked together like coins in a beggar's cup. "Thank you," I said again, my voice steady despite the rage building in my chest. Sailor beamed at me. "Now you won't have to worry about meals for days. Isn't that wonderful?" Wonderful, as if being handed scraps like a stray dog was some kind of blessing. The couple at the next table was openly staring now. The woman leaned toward her husband, whispering behind her hand. I caught fragments. "So sad. At least they're helping." Must be difficult. Travis looked like he wanted to crawl under the table. His hands were clenched in his lap, his jaw tight with mortification. But he said nothing. Did nothing. Just sat there while his fiancée's family publicly humiliated his father. "The thing about family," Cordelia continued, apparently unaware of or unconcerned by the spectacle she'd created, "is that we support each other through difficult times. Some people are too proud to accept help, but real family doesn't let pride get in the way of practical needs." The waiter returned with the check presenter, a black leather folder that he placed carefully beside Lorenzo's elbow. Even from across the table, I could see the total through the transparent pocket, $1.850. Lorenzo reached for it with the casual confidence of a man who'd never had a card declined, never counted change, never wondered if he had enough. "This one's on us," he announced. "Family celebration." Lorenzo reached for his wallet with the practiced ease of a man accustomed to picking up expensive tabs. He selected a platinum card, the kind banks reserve for their most valued customers, and slid it into the leather presenter without even glancing at the total. "Family celebration," he repeated, signaling the waiter with a confident nod. The young man returned quickly, card reader in hand. Lorenzo inserted his card with a flourish, already reaching for his phone to check messages while the transaction processed. The reader beeped. Once, twice. The waiter's expression shifted from professional courtesy to concern. "I'm sorry, sir, but this card has been declined." Lorenzo looked up sharply. "That's impossible. Try it again." The waiter complied, running the card a second time. Same result. Same apologetic beep. "There must be some system error," Lorenzo said, his voice losing its earlier confidence. That card has a very high limit. Cordelia leaned closer, whispering urgently, "Try the business account card." Other diners were beginning to notice the commotion. The couple who'd witnessed my earlier humiliation now watched with undisguised curiosity. A waiter at a nearby table slowed his pace, clearly listening. Lorenzo fumbled through his wallet, producing another card. "This one's connected to our restaurant accounts. Much higher limit." The reader beeped its rejection again. "Sir," the waiter said quietly, "perhaps you could call your bank? Sometimes there are security holds when—" "I know how credit cards work." Lorenzo snapped, his face reddening. He was checking his phone frantically, now scrolling through banking apps, his earlier composure evaporating. The silence at our table was deafening. Travis stared at his hands. Sailor's perfect smile had frozen in place. Cordelia whispered suggestions that grew more desperate with each failed attempt. "Perhaps I could help," I said quietly. All eyes turned to me. Lorenzo paused, his frantic phone checking. I reached into my worn wallet past the basic debit card and withdrew the other card, the one I'd kept hidden. Heavy black metal. No spending limit, my name embossed in silver letters. Weston Hale Regional Director. The waiter's entire demeanor changed the moment he saw it. His eyes widened with recognition. He'd probably seen fewer than a dozen of these cards in his career. "Of course, Mr. Hale," he said with newfound respect. "I'll process this immediately." The transaction went through in seconds. No beeps, no declines, no drama. Just the quiet efficiency of unlimited corporate purchasing power. "Actually," I said as the waiter prepared to leave, "there's something you all should know about me." The table fell silent. Even the neighboring diners seemed to lean in. "I'm not exactly a retired maintenance worker." I kept my voice calm, conversational. "I'm the regional director of Rocky Mountain Renewable Energy. We manage wind and solar farms across 7 states. Travis's mouth fell open. "Dad, why didn't you ever tell me?" "Because I wanted you to grow up understanding that a person's worth isn't measured by their paycheck." I turned to Lorenzo, whose face had gone pale. "My salary is $48,000 per month." Cordelia made a small choking sound. "But here's the interesting part, Lorenzo." I leaned forward slightly. "Your restaurant group uses quite a bit of electricity. 8 locations, industrial kitchens, walk-in freezers, heating and cooling systems running around the clock." Lorenzo's eyes widened as understanding began to dawn. "Your monthly energy bill averages $28,000 every month for the past 3 years." I smiled. "I personally review and approve all contracts over $25,000. The silence was absolute. Even the ambient restaurant noise seemed to fade. "You see, Lorenzo, you're not just meeting Travis's father tonight. You're having dinner with your energy supplier, the man who signs off on keeping your lights on your freezers, running your restaurants operational." I let that sink in for a moment. "In fact, you're one of our most valued commercial clients. I've probably signed a dozen contracts with your company over the years." Lorenzo stared at me like I'd just announced I was from another planet. Cordelia's jewelry suddenly seemed less impressive. Sailor's confident smile had completely disappeared. Travis was shaking his head in amazement. "Dad, I had no idea. All these years you thought I was just a poor old man who needed your charity," I said, looking around the table. "Someone you could help with $600 a month in doggy bags." The waiter returned with my card and the receipt. "Thank you, Mr. Hale. I hope you enjoyed your evening." "Very educational," I replied. Lorenzo finally found his voice. "Weston, we had no idea." I stood up, pocketing my card. The doggy bag sat beside my chair like evidence of their judgment. "No," I said quietly. "You didn't." The silence stretched like a taut wire ready to snap. Lorenzo's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. Cordelia's flawless makeup couldn't hide the flush rising up her neck. Sailor stared at the table as if escape might appear there. Finally, Lorenzo spoke. "Weston, we had no idea. We never meant to. We wouldn't have—" His voice faltered, the confident businessman reduced to a man scrambling for solid ground. "It was all a misunderstanding," Cordelia added, her poise shattered. "We were just trying to be helpful. We assumed." "You assumed exactly what I wanted you to assume," I said evenly. "And you showed me exactly who you are." Sailor looked up, panic flickering in her eyes. "Mr. Hale, I hope you don't think we were being disrespectful. We genuinely care about Travis's happiness." "Do you?" I asked. "Or do you care about what Travis can provide, his pilot's salary, his stability, how neatly he fits into your world?" The neighboring table had stopped pretending not to listen. Other diners craned their necks, eager for the drama. I lifted the doggy bag beside my chair, its styrofoam containers a quiet reminder of their judgment. This is in my car now, Cordelia. Very thoughtful of you to make sure I wouldn't go hungry. She winced as if I'd struck her. And Lorenzo, I continued each month. When your energy bills cross my desk, $28,000 on schedule, I'll remember this evening. I'll remember how you treated a man you thought had nothing. Travis stood abruptly. Dad, can we talk privately? We stepped toward the restaurant's entrance. His face was a mixture of shame, amazement, and something close to relief. I'm sorry, he said quietly. I'm sorry I was embarrassed by you. Sorry I didn't defend you more. Sorry I let them treat you like what I appeared to be? I finished. Travis, you did defend me. Maybe not as strongly as you could have, but you tried. That matters. But why didn't you ever tell me? About your job, your salary, any of it. I looked at my son, this good man I'd raised who had gotten lost in other people's expectations. Because I wanted you to respect people for who they are not, what they have. To understand that worth isn't measured by a bank account. I do understand that, he said. I learned it from you. Did you then? Why were you nervous about me meeting them? Why ask me to dress nicely? His shoulders sagged. Because I got caught up in their world. I started seeing myself through their eyes, and I was afraid they'd see you the same way. We returned to the table. The Chambers family sat frozen discomfort thick in the air. Sailor, I said, Travis deserves someone who loves him for who he is, not what he provides or how he looks in your family's world. If you can't be that person, let him find someone who can. Her eyes filled with tears, but she nodded. Lorenzo, Cordelia. I added, you've built something impressive with your restaurants. But success without character is only expensive emptiness. I picked up my keys. Thank you for dinner. It was educational. The drive back to Denver was silent for 20 minutes. Then Travis spoke. What happens now? Now you decide what kind of man you want to be, what kind of husband, what kind of father someday, whether you'll build a life on appearances or substance. And Sailor, that's for you to decide. But remember, if someone loves you only when you're successful, what happens when life gets hard? We drove through the mountain darkness, headlights cutting through the night. Below us, Denver's lights spread like scattered diamonds. Dad, yeah, I'm proud of you. Not because of your job or your money, but because you taught me something tonight about dignity and how to treat people. That's all I ever wanted, son. Will you tell me about your work sometime? The real story. I smiled. I'd like that. As we pulled into my apartment complex, Travis looked around with new eyes. You could live anywhere. Why here? Because this is enough, I said. Because I don't need to prove anything to anyone, except apparently to those who think a man's worth can be measured by his address. The Chambers family learned something tonight, too. Maybe. But that's not why I did it. I did it for you to show you that respect isn't bought or inherited. It's earned by how you treat others, especially those you think can't offer you anything. We sat in silence for a moment, father and son understanding each other better than we had in years. Thanks, Dad. You're welcome, son. Looking back on that evening at the Broadmoor, I realized God placed me in that situation for a reason. He wanted me to teach not just the Chambers family, but my own son Travis about the true meaning of respect and dignity. These betrayal stories happen more often than we think, people judging others based on appearances, wealth, or status instead of character. What I learned that night is something the Almighty has been trying to teach humanity for centuries. Treat others as you would want to be treated, regardless of what they appear to have or lack. The grandpa stories my own father told me about respect suddenly made perfect sense. When God blesses us with success, it's not meant to make us feel superior. It's meant to humble us and remind us of our responsibility to lift others up. Travis discovered something precious that evening, that his father's greatest wealth wasn't the $48,000 monthly salary, but the values I'd tried to instill in him. These grandpa stories become our legacy. The betrayal stories teach us wisdom, and both shape who we become. The final betrayal stories often reveal the most about our own character when we choose how to respond.